Right, welcome back, Virtual Riders. Today's session we want to look at Methodist encounter with Native American populations in North America. And we remember this has been a generative theme for Methodist identity going back to John Wesley's own motivations, the second rise of Methodism in Georgia in the 1830s. His motivation to come to Savannah and to serve in the colony of Georgia was to work among the Yamacraw subsection of Creek nation, and we know that some of his theology was shaped by that failed experience. Methodist identity during the earliest phase of the 18th century was not as shaped by the encounter with Native Americans. It was not until Western demographics pushed into more heavily populated Native American areas such as the Ohio Territory in the early 1800s that Methodism first had to, by accident as it were, create a encounter with the Native American people. The first sustained engagement was with the Wyandotte people of Ohio, and it was purely by accident. An African-American, partly African-American, partly Native American man named John Stewart, pictured here, was converted in a camp meeting in 1814 while he was inebriated, but he sobered up due to the Methodist message and began to sense a call to work and to preach among the Wyandotte. He hired a interpreter, and the interpreter was converted while interpreting to the Wyandotte, and a number of the leading men, the chiefs of the Wyandottes, were converted under John Stewart's preaching. This posed a polity question for the Methodist bishop of the area. With John Stewart preaching, he was not a local pastor or an itinerant pastor with any kind of preaching orders, and so this kind of extra conference work without supervision called upon the official episcopacy to create a structure for mission. J.B. Finley, one of the great Ohio Methodists, long-serving presiding elder, was the first itinerant Methodist preacher appointed to really oversee the work of John Stewart and the Methodist mission to the Wyandotte, bringing more connectional control at the time. But going back to 1819, John Stewart was set aside as a licensed preacher in 1818, but this was not enough. The Ohio Annual Conference in 1819 established the first official constituted Methodist mission, ultimately coming under J.B. Finley's work in 1823 to 1827. Also, in order to raise funds and to appoint quote, proper under supervision preachers, the Methodist Mission Society was created in 1819 to fundraise and to create a cadre of preachers. This Methodist Mission Society we're going to look at in its larger sense, but was designed originally, the Methodist Mission Society in 1819, to work with the native populations. If we look at other Native American work, you can see here in my book, that the great eastern nations, the Cherokee, was an early work, even before the split of the Northern and Southern Church. The Cherokee nation was a great literate nation, and Methodist missionaries were at work with the Cherokee and protested the removal in 1830 under Jackson's Indian Removal Act and the subsequent Trail of Tears. The Cherokee mission of the Methodist Episcopal Church registered formal protest with Washington in one of our brighter episodes of prophetic witness of the 19th century. You can see here the Cherokee were ultimately relocated to the Native American territory, and this map shows basically the settlement patterns of Oklahoma after the Trail of Tears. The Creek in the Georgia and Alabama area had a missionary work, the Asbury Manual Labor School, led by William Capers, who also learned his mission work through slave plantation mission. This is William Capers. He ultimately becomes a bishop of the Southern Church, but through his work founding the Asbury Manual School in Georgia, converted one of the great leaders, Samuel Chakotay, principal chief of the Creek Nation, becomes a preacher, licensed, ultimately becoming the chief of the Creek Nation when it was relocated in 1830 in Oklahoma. The Choctaw also relocated into southern Oklahoma Territory. These great nations in the Oklahoma territories at the split of 1844 and 45 voted to adhere to the Southern Church, the Methodist Episcopal Church South, Cherokee, Creek, and Seminole, Choctaw, and Chickasaw, the five great nations. Not trusting the U.S. government, they saw the more states, local rights, Southern Church as more trustworthy. And Samuel Chakotay himself fought for the Southern Confederacy during the Civil War, as did many of the Methodist Native American leaders. On the northern side, there's a number of groups. The Wyandotte of Ohio, Wyandotte County today, and the Northern Church began work with the Wyandotte in Kansas, particularly from the 1870s onward. The Shawnee were relocated also, and the Methodist Church worked with the Shawnee in the Kansas area as well from 1830. Western work, early in 1830s, we've already talked about the Oregon Mission and the Native American, the NAPAIR, Native American call to work in Oregon, bringing together the Oregon Mission, which ultimately went into the Northern Church. And then also some interesting stories of the Plains Native Americans being converted under Southern Methodist J.J. Methvin, in 1887. The Plains Indians, the Arapaho, and the Kiowa, and a number of the former scouts that had been a part of the Battle of Wounded Knee and had been a part of the massacre, some would say the legitimate resistance to Custer and the U.S. Army's incursion into the holy areas there. These scouts were converted under Methvin and became Methodist Episcopal Church leaders, and it caused great interest in the Methodist and national press. You can see here this all of this material is summarized basically here within our slide here. Methodist mission to the Native Americans in the 1830s, really both in the Oklahoma Territory and also in the Pacific Northwest, really was the gateway for Methodist work, ultimately north and south in the Midwest and the Western territories. As we indicated, Samuel Chakotay has left behind his autobiography and writings, a great lay preacher of the Creek Nation. When white settlers overtook the Oklahoma Territory in 1906, they already had strong Methodist work there, and this had a tendency to marginalize the Native American work there. The MEC Oklahoma Conference was created in 1892 as a white conference, and the Indian Mission Conference continued to operate. The Indian Mission Conferences of both the North and the South continued to work in their respective areas. And even today, there's an Oklahoma Indian Mission Conference that continues to do outstanding work with support from the Board of Global Ministries, the General Board of Global Ministries, and you can see here the statistics. The Oklahoma Indian Mission Conference, 89 churches as of 2006, and you can see the various great nations that are numbered among Methodists in Oklahoma. There's also some other Native American work in Florida among the Seminole, who were not removed, who resisted successfully the U.S. Army removal. But you can see here that there have been churches for well over 150 years doing excellent work, not only in Oklahoma but throughout the U.S., in some ways offering a successful vision of what Wesley dreamed about in his second rise of Methodism in Savannah. His dreams for Methodism to be and for the church to be numbered among Native Americans had to wait over 100 years, but Methodist mission, while late to the Native American population, has provided solid prophetic witness and support for self-determination. It's not a perfect story, but it is a story of Native American identity expressed through Methodist structures in partnership with American Methodist history.